Hello, and welcome to Empowerment Radio, the podcast of empowerment coaching. I'm Adrienne Elise. Well, the title of today's podcast is called Trauma and Story. So we're going to be exploring the concept, the energy around, the truths, the lies around trauma. Now, trauma is, we've all got it. Either if not in this life, then past lives. It's part of the human experience. We have it in our ancestry, in the DNA, the stories that have been passed on to us over time. So when we experience trauma, either this life, last life, in our early childhood, if we can't remember it, it's in our consciousness or subconsciousness, there's a map that's created of this trauma. This story of what happened is created again and again in our emotional trauma. It's created again and again, a fear of this happening again and being stuck in the past of the story. In our physical body, it's been shown that the cells actually, like say in our brain, where we don't even have sensation like pain, but our brain, when there's brain trauma, the cells, and then the cells in our body, anywhere in our body that have experienced trauma, actually hold on and keep reliving that experience again and again. There is a memory. So trauma is very powerful. And trauma keeps us trapped in the story of the past. And when we're just like our cells, our psyche creates the trauma again and again. So indigo souls often, seems like in all of the sessions I've worked with indigo souls, it's a common story that indigo souls have chosen traumatic childhoods on some level or another. It might be physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, or it could be as simple as just the trauma of not being validated and being actually disregarded because of the type of soul spirit that they are. Their sensitivity, their emotionality, their intuitive psychic abilities. So this is something that all indigos seem to have chosen, and it's been a big question for me. Why? Why is a soul group chosen to have these, maybe come into a family of arch enemies? Like, why would you choose as your parents the bloodline that's an arch rival of yours, has persecuted you over many lifetimes? The people that are supposed to nurture you in this life and in your existence. Like, why would you choose that? So there is an answer here. And it seems to be that indigo souls choose very difficult, traumatic childhoods as a way to clear in this lifetime, made a decision because the time we're at, that this evolution we've been working for many lifetimes on planet Earth is now happening. So this lifetime, the indigos have chosen to release all trauma and all karma, all ancestral contractual arrangements, and completely release themselves from the story, these stories of trauma that they've experienced. So could it be that choosing a traumatic childhood in those very early formative years is a way to clear all trauma and all karma throughout all lifetimes in this evolution? Kind of a big task. So this has kind of been a definition of indigos in a way. It's like they have wanted to dive deep, into these trauma stories in the ancestry, replaying these in early childhood, in order to completely release themselves and perhaps a collective. But unfortunately, a lot of indigos get stuck in this trauma, and that is the energy of this. And it becomes an identity. Now, this is the deal. We talked about trauma as something that happens, and then it's a story, around this trauma, and then it becomes a repeated pattern. So basically what happens is that this trauma keeps us stuck in the past. And so there's a narrative out there in spiritual evolution that says that trauma is what allows us to evolve. So I question this and I challenge this, because what I see is that trauma keeps us stuck in the story of the past and fear of that story creating in the future. And the only time we have is now. Time doesn't even really exist. So if you can't be in the present moment because you're stuck in past trauma, you're on a cellular level, your cells are replaying this trauma, then you can't live. Your life has been taken from you to a certain degree. So this trauma keeps us in the story of the past. Proven on a cellular level, the cells just hold on to this memory. Say you were in, a car accident and had a traumatic, something happened physically to your body. We'll speak of physical trauma. And the cells that on a cellular level, and sometimes we feel it as pain, but sometimes, like in the brain, we don't feel the pain. But the cells are still playing out that story. So this keeps us creating trauma, and it keeps us from evolving, keeps us from being present in the present moment and claiming our life and having the experience of our spiritual evolution. So it seems to me that the control energies on the planet that have been working against our spiritual evolution have specifically used trauma as a way to keep us. Now, this trauma, the stories of trauma keep us attached to this, like I talked about in the indigo, it can become an identity. Like, oh, it's almost like who I am is trauma. This is who I am. And this is where we need to, this is our opportunity to clear this story. Because it keeps us attached to our ego personality. It's like, oh, I experienced this and this is who I am and it defines me. It's like, no, it's not. It's just something you experienced. It's not who you are in your soul spirit. It's not the truth of you right here in this moment. And yet we're all stuck in these places. So part of the thing here for me is this energy of this, well, the story there's always a story that goes along with the trauma. And so and a lot of times these stories, if this is ancestral trauma, if this is past life trauma, if this is a trauma that happened when you weren't aware in your everyday consciousness, then this trauma is hard to find. It's hard to find that story. So there's this energy around, part of the healing of trauma that's available to us involves looking at the story, validating the story. But we can't get stuck there and make that story who we are. It's just something we experienced. So I kind of think of it like this. And you have a small child, say a toddler, or, in the early years of life, and say they fall down and hurt themselves. Okay, and a lot of us adults have this kind of thing, you're fine, you're going to be okay, get up, move on, you'll be fine, right? But as an early childhood educator, I found that if you take a minute and you ask them what happened and, show me where it hurts and kind of talk through it for a minute, they can more easily move on. If it's not validated and the experience isn't validated, then that experience continues to live on, and the rest, they're going to keep that energy with them. But if you say, hey, oh wow, I see that you were hurt. So this is part of the main healing with trauma. We need to listen to the story You know, story is not what defines us. It's not the truth of who we are, but it can set us free. So this is why it's so powerful to do past life healing and work like what I do in the intuitive healing sessions and the coaching, because you can go find these stories that are hidden in your subconscious. Now, this is part of the energy that confirms how trauma, you know, is a tool to keep us in the past and keep us from our spiritual evolution, is that trauma is one of the main methods in the MK Ultra program and the mind control programs that were instigated by our own secret government. They are trauma based. They use trauma in the subconscious in order to control the mind. Okay, this is really, really important. The first thing to set yourself free from mind control, from the possibility of being manipulated on that level, is to heal and release trauma. We all have it. This is part of the human condition. It's in our collective consciousness. But when these indigo souls choose to address these stories, clear these stories, and heal these stories. Now, this is one of the big lies about trauma, is that trauma can't be healed. You're just stuck with it. And that's the biggest lie here we're addressing today, besides this whole story that we are our trauma. There is healing available. And what the healing does is validate this inner child, this pure essence, soul, spirit, pure essence, so they can move on with their day. You can move on. See, trauma keeps us trapped in the story. And trauma occurs. We know this, but life goes on. Time keeps happening, and yet we are prevented from living, truly living, and moving forward with time. Just like the child who hurts themselves and doesn't get validated in that moment, you know, as their day goes on, it might kind of be off. The energy's kind of off. This is our life. It's kind of off because we've never been validated in our trauma. We've never been able to find the story and release them. And this is an interesting thing. We've got this narrative that what's hard and what's difficult is going to move you forward. And we bought into it. Okay, so some part of ourselves has said yes to this. You know, and we always have to look at it like this. Okay, we've been, you know, indigos have stories, lifetime after lifetime, of being persecuted, abused, locked up, tortured, whatever, you name it. And it's kind of like, why, what's going on here? You know, like, why, how did these pure souls come into this existence and be treated so horribly, beyond what they can even imagine to be possible? And yet it happened. So some part, we have to go up above. We have to get to that bigger picture and know that some part of ourselves, we have to come out of victim and know that our higher self, God consciousness, allowed this to happen. Our higher self said yes to the most horrible experiences. So our spiritual evolution. So perhaps let's just buy into this for a second. Let's just say, okay, trauma does keep us stuck in the past and fearful of the future and unable to live our life. I mean, you've seen people, and we've all been here at certain times where this is trauma of something that occurred and you can't even function. You can't feed yourself. You can't make decisions. You know, just there's no ability to be present with what's happening in the now moment. And so let's just say, though, that in the bigger pictures, trauma evolves us spiritually. So this is a narrative and a story. And it's only true until we decide to believe something different. And this is where we set ourselves free. This is where we come out of victim. And this is where we evolve beyond trauma. So we've got to reach up and find this trust in our higher self, in the bigger picture. And this is a big part of healing trauma. Because when you have gotten to a point where you have evolved spiritually to get to this point of coming out of victim and wanting the bigger picture and wanting this bigger trust in God and the universe, creator, source, and your higher self, then the trauma might, it might still occur. It will definitely occur at some point on some level. Why? And at that point, you have to say, okay, this is happening for me to clear all trauma. So everything traumatic that happens to me from now on is an opportunity to clear all trauma. Because I see bigger. I am choosing to a different story. So trauma evolves you until it's not how you want to go anymore. And that's when it just doesn't resonate, and trauma falls away from our life. And even things that happen, we have this bigger trusting energy. We have this bubble of light that moves us through life, and we can be that light for other people that are going through difficult things and be like, there's a bigger story to this, and you're healing, you're evolving, you're going to be okay. And that's why we're here as indigo souls. That's not an easy task. Come in, arch enemy, deeply abused in childhood, and then, evolving, facing all of this trauma, these stories, clearing them, healing them, so that we can be the light for other people. So the true energy here, in this, to kind of just correct a little bit of this story. So there's a lot of people evolving beyond trauma right now, but also feeling scared about it. I was like, can you let go of this part of who you are? Like, who are you without trauma? Like, do you even have an identity? Are you lost in the world? We're so attached to our stories of pain. And as you can see, this is an ancestral. It's like a literal entity that becomes, that gets stronger and stronger through each generation. It's like, well, this is who we are. And my ancestors experienced this, and this is who we are. And we're going to relive this, and we're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it alive. And it's actually keeping the individual soul spirits of this bloodline from evolving. Now, this is an energy, if you think back to the catastrophe in Atlantis. And the story is that we misused power and there was a catastrophe, but that's not actually true. The true story is that we were set up. The power workers, the light workers at that time, it was an external force that caused that catastrophe, and yet we took it inside. And actually, this was the thing, is that there was a huge leap in spiritual evolution happening, our natural course of events, as people were learning and growing, and the technology around our physical body, our energetic field was coming forward, and the spiritual evolution was about to happen. And there's all these people on the edge of this evolution, and the powers, the control energies on the planet said no. And those same people that were on the edge of this power leap in our personal power and physical, energetic, we'll call it ascension, there was this huge catastrophe on the planet. So now we have this belief system in our DNA that spiritual evolution equals catastrophe. See how that works? See how trauma is used to actually keep us from our spiritual evolution. Until until you don't resonate with trauma anymore. So it's time to choose something different, a different story. And we validate these stories. We don't need to find all the trauma and understand every truth of every story. We can just find key ones to help us release, help us heal on a deep level, change our vibration, and then trauma no longer resonates. So this is the bigger picture. This is the trust in your higher self, that you're evolving beyond trauma. Now, this is an individual choice and an individual process, but especially with the indigo souls, this has a power to affect the collective. When trauma becomes karmically inappropriate for you in your experience, you can bring the light along. Now, this is a problem because the indigos feel very responsible. Part of the reason they're stuck here in this karmic cycle is because, and this is an old story, but they feel responsible for the pain and the trauma of humanity. Like it's their fault. They've been programmed to believe. It's like each indigo soul's walking around with this deep subconscious belief that everything, all pain on the planet, is all poverty, all war, all destruction is their fault. This doesn't really make sense, but this is how they feel. And this is an old story. It's too much to get into right now, but it's time to change it. And so, but the indigos feel so responsible, and that the trauma of the collective is their fault. And so it feels like for you to evolve beyond trauma, you're leaving your family behind, maybe the whole planet behind, the collective consciousness. And this is exactly the conundrum that got indigo souls stuck in this loop of karmic, stuck in this karmic evolution. But now we have an opportunity to get out. When we evolve personally, choose, the trauma is no longer her story. We're going to choose the present moment. We're going to choose to heal and release and not identify ourselves with these stories in our ancestry. So just go ahead right here, right now. And if you're ready and you would like to, go ahead and receive an energetic wave to heal, release, transform your DNA stories. That spiritual evolution is going to lead to catastrophe. That trauma is who you are and you couldn't even exist without it. Go ahead and just take a few deep breaths and connect, feel yourself connected to Mother Earth and receive this DNA healing, clearing, release. These are distorted programs, like we're a computer and this is bad software. It's got malware in it and it's time for it to go. So go ahead and just receive that healing and just reprogramming right here, right now, your DNA. You no longer identify with trauma as a way to evolve. Your evolution is now back on track with your original timeline. That's being in the present moment and enjoying life, being present, living. Because now you have the present moment available to you. And the stories of your ancestors are releasing. And here we say, okay, but I feel like I'm leaving everyone behind. But actually, this is how you take them with you. Indigo souls are powerful projectors of reality. They have many experiences and many evolutions. They've been severely targeted and punished for these gifts in order to keep them from them, in order to keep the control energies in charge and keep our spiritual evolution from happening for thousands and thousands of years so they can feed on us and feed on humanity and keep us in a lower evolution. But you know what? Time's up. It's time. And the thing is, we live in this free will universe. So if the people around you, your family, are not ready to let go of trauma, that's okay. It's not your job. But what a powerful energy, instead of staying with them in trauma, to demonstrate, to be the healing, to be the light. to be the living, breathing demonstration that life is happening right now. And trauma is a story we bought into from the past. And we validate it, and we heal it, and we listen to that inner child, that inner infant, that part of our soul that's been so traumatized over so many lifetimes. And we hear that story, and we listen, and we move on. And we evolve beyond trauma by choosing something different right here, right now, receiving that ancestral DNA healing. And this is our opportunity to reprogram our reality. So as an individual soul, when you take these steps to face these deep hidden stories that are keeping you in the past, something that your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents experienced that's still living out in your cells, and freeing up, validating the story so we can change it. And reprogram our reality. Because we've got to. The deal with the indigo souls and the newly arrived crystal souls in these last 20 years or so, and every child that's being born today, they can't hang with this trauma vibe anymore, right? It's like, we can only be here for so much. And it's like, we're out of here. The crystals are like, yeah, whatever, guys, we're out of here. We're not going to put up with this. We are evolving beyond this, and we don't have a choice. And you can be a part on the cutting edge of this revolution by honoring that inner child and healing that inner trauma and writing a new story right here, right now. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this Empowerment Radio, the podcast of empowerment coaching. Experience the exhilarating feeling of being on your true path. Healed, whole, and complete. A living, breathing example of the light that is the truth of this world. I'm Adrienne Elise. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, namaste.